Hi everyone, this is Becca Kukala and this is my Troubled Edens project for our Geography of National Parks class. I chose Olympic National Park as my subject and their struggle of the invasive species in that park. As you can see, Olympic National Park resides within the state of Washington. This green blob up in the upper left corner kind of represents Olympic National Park. As you see, it's sort of part of the plateau of Washington, and it covers a good amount of space in Washington. Invasive species in Olympic National Park. The real issue here is that people are introducing invasive exotic plants into the park. These invasive plants cause major ecological damage to the park. Ecological changes to the park cause damage to all wildlife and potentially the guests themselves. Removing these species from the park has been a really tough job. Looking at both sides of the situation, we're always supposed to see the positive and the negative in both sides of a situation. Unfortunately, in this situation, there really isn't much good going on here. They potentially add some beauty to the park and add some more natural flora, but they do far more harm than they do good. Negatives to the park is that they drive out all of the native species. They carry disease to the plants and the wildlife, and they contribute to habitat degradation in several ways. There really isn't a whole lot of good coming from these plants here. Some examples of these invasive species and their impacts in the park are wood-boring beetles. They carry disease that kill the trees in the area once they bore into them. There are quagga and zebra mussels that drive out other native species, and their larvae clogs water drains. These are carried across from people's boats when they take them out of lakes and streams and do not clean them off. And there are over 200 species of non-native plants in the park. Some cause fierce competition for nutrients, light, space, and they carry disease to other plants and possibly wildlife. These are the top invasive plants within Olympic National Park itself. As you can see, this is a picture of Scots broom, which it kind of has a yellowish color here. There's Canada thistle, Himalayan blackberry, English ivy, English holly, herb Robert, and Japanese knotwood. Here's some picture of kind of what the plants look like. You can see each one is distinctly different in what it looks like and how to identify it. One of the main things that the park says that helps is prevention, and nobody can really prevent these things from spreading if they don't know what they look like. So really studying up on the invasive species of whatever park you're going to before you go there really helps the environment and the park not to have these things spread to other places. A good example of the harm that these invasive species do is seen in Scots broom. For example, Scots broom is damaging the salmon population of the Hoh River. One monoculture of the plant can produce up to 12,000 seeds in a year. These seeds can infiltrate the river and outcompete other species along the river. The plant grows up to 15 feet. These species are destroying the native species of the park's beauty and ecosystems. In a direct quote from the National Park Service's webpage on Olympic National Park, they say, "They can affect fire ecology, water movement, soil erosion, native plants, and wildlife. The weeds do this by drying out wetlands, smothering native trees, poisoning animals, or causing other impacts." So as you can see, the Park Service itself is trying to warn people of the serious dangers to the ecosystems and the parks that these invasive species are having on the land. What is the park doing to combat this issue? Visitors are the real issue here. Prevention is the best method, as I said before. The park is urging people not to bring in foreign firewood, to clean their boats before entering the park, and to never bring any unnatural species into the park. The park uses herbicides, weed pulling, and other such methods to remove already established invasive species. But once these species have already invaded the park, it is very hard to remove them. Specific tips from Olympic National Park. Before entering the park, you're suggested to brush off your shoes, clothes, pets, livestock, vehicles, tires, and any species that can carry seeds or plants with them. Do not throw fruit seeds or other trash in the woods. Learn to point out the invasive species in the park and try to leave as little trace as possible. This is a graph of the total recreational visitors in Olympic National Park from 1934 all the way to 2017. As you can see, the growth of the park has grown into the millions of visitors, whereas in 1934 it was below even 200,000 a year. This shows how many people are coming and going throughout the park in a given year, and with this mass amount of people moving in and out, it's important that everybody knows how to protect the park and its species inside, or else the park will be no more. What will happen if the issue goes unsolved? It might be more serious than you think. More invasive species will continue to die out. The invasive species will deplete the area of its nutrients. Wildlife species will become unbalanced and die out due to the poisoning and food change by these plants. Guests may become harmed by the species and thus will stop coming to the park, and funding will dwindle and the park will not be maintained. It seems very small in the beginning, but these invasive species take over everything and it could potentially be the demise of the park. This is just a little video on the threat of invasive species by Ted Ed. I think Ted Ed does a great job of informing people in a way that a lot of people can understand, and it really shows all sides of the story.